Okay. Okay. Well, here we go. So I'll tell you that when we're talking about structured conversation, the number one thing that I try to communicate is the purpose of the conversation has to be very clear, and um, and a lot of times the pedagogical shift that needs to happen is a shift in our own, as teachers, our own intention of the conversation. Because a lot of times, I mean, turn and talk and think, pair, share have been around forever. But a lot of times, from the student perspective, it feels like they are um, they are being tasked with something. Like you're gonna talk to your partner because I'm gonna call on somebody because I want to see if y'all get the right answer. And a lot of times that feels like a task in the same way that completing a worksheet's like a task. Um, and I hear kids all the time say, "Oh, school's so boring. I don't like school." And um, I think to myself, that doesn't make any sense because um, or they'll say explicitly, learning is dumb. I don't like to learn. And I'll think you're a human being and it's in our human nature to want to learn. So that doesn't make any sense to me. And um I've been thinking a lot lately that maybe part of the problem is that students often feel like school is just a series of tasks that they have to complete. And one way we can shift that is to go from um, saying, answer this question with your partner because that's another job I'm giving you as your teacher. We can go from that to saying, we're going to have a class conversation and everyone's going to be invited to this conversation. And we're all going to be communicating equitably as a class community. And that's what these small group conversations are about. And so when we do the structured conversations with the visual and glossary, we really emphasize not just getting them to talk to their partner, but um, having them feel like their voice is heard in both the small group setting as well as in the full class setting. And so I'll model what that looks like. By the way, do interrupt me at any point.
Okay.
Um, so I'll model what that looks like. I've got a visual for Seneca Falls Convention, which is actually, there we go. It's eighth grade US history. So perfect. So what I will say is with new visuals, especially when we're talking about eighth grade US history or any subjects where the visuals are pretty dense, which is really any subject where, or any grade level where there's a lot of depth and breadth to the teaks. You'll see the visual has a lot of stuff in it because it's covering that depth of the teaks. Um, Whenever we have visuals like that, the first thing I always encourage teachers to do before they have a structured conversation about it is to just do a simple activity of having the students start to pick out things that they notice in the visual. And um, in a typical V&G lesson, this is framed as the warm up of the lesson. And so if the lesson is on the Seneca Falls Convention and we're going to be coming back to this visual several times in this lesson, what I tell teachers is, you know, the kids come in, this is on the board, the bell rings, and say, okay, I'm going to take attendance. While I'm taking attendance with your partner, just come up with a list of 5 things you notice in this visual. And they can do it verbally or they can do it in writing. I guess Cynthia, you already know that teachers can edit these PowerPoints ahead of
Yes.
time, yeah, so they can choose which one they want. And so, um, and I really encourage students to just say anything that they notice. Like they can say, "I notice the calendar," or "I notice men and women," or "I notice the women's rights movement," or "I notice the equal sign." They can say when we encourage them to do that, what they're doing without realizing it is they're just familiarizing themselves with the visual in a low stakes way. And I also say, see if see if you and your partner can come up with one thing that you wonder about in this image. And they come up with some really interesting things. Um, and some of them are questions I know we're going to be addressing in the lesson. So I just say, that is really interesting. I wondered that too. Let's see. Or some of them are going to be things that, we can easily address right there. But the important thing is getting their curiosity going. And you want to try this? You want to come up with a list of 5 things you noticed in this visual?
Okay. Let's see. To really think about it. Well, there's a lot of things to notice here. Definitely, let's see that there is no discrimination. There's a balance between men and women. They're all created equal. Um, it looks like the 2 women, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, are very important and are leaders of this movement. And you want to pick out 5 things?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not counting. I think you're like at 4 already.
Yeah. Um, and then Susan B. Anthony, Sojourner Truth are like, yes, we can. Um, which reminds me of um other people that have been very influential in change.
Cesar
And then,
Chavez, Barack Obama.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
So that connection there.
Movement leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, great. What you've done just now is you basically, in a really unstructured and low stakes way, told me about the Seneca Falls Convention, um, which is good because it means you're preparing to talk formally about the Seneca Falls Convention.
mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, so I would do this where I'd say like, okay, I'm gonna call on a few groups. I'm gonna call on, person number 2 in 3 different groups. If I've had the desks numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that.
Okay.
And so I'll just have them share different things, and I'll say, does anybody wonder anything? Um, I've shared this one with students before, and one kid actually said, I wonder if she was the founder of Mott's applesauce.
Oh.
I don't know the answer to that question. It's a good question.
That's
Um,
funny.
so and then what I also might do is um I also might model the wondering. So I might say and the noticing. So I might say, did anybody notice? No, well, Cynthia noticed that says all men and women are created equal. Did anybody wonder about where that language came from and try to activate some background knowledge?
Okay.
Maybe some kids are going to talk about, oh, well, the Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal.
Mm-hmm.
And so, did anybody wonder why they made that change to include the words and women? Something like that. Um, from here, we're going to go into a formal conversation.
Okay.
And this is where that Q triple SA structure that you're familiar with,
Yes.
and all the structure of this conversation is. And so here's how I would model this. Importantly, or here's how I would facilitate this as a teacher. So importantly, I'm not going to say answer this question. I'm going to very deliberately say, instead of answer this question, let's think about this question. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pose the question without asking the question. So let's think about this question. Let's take a look at this visual for the Seneca Falls Convention and take a look at what happened before, take a look at what happened during, take a look at what happened after. So I'm kind of really deliberately going slowly through it. And then I'd have the signal, which you're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And really importantly, um, I'm not going to say raise your hand when you're ready. I'm going to say everyone raise your hand and lower it when you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
and that's to get everybody activated. So that's me kind of proposing the question. Um, and I might not even say when you're ready to answer the question. What I might say is when you can finish the sentence. Oh, and the other thing that I'll do before they even talk to their partner is I'll say, um, let's all pronounce this word out loud together as a class. And I'll break it down. Seneca Falls Convention, um, and then Seneca Falls Convention. And what I'll often do is I'll often because especially when you get secondary, like eighth grade, especially as you get to high school, some kids might have a little bit of like too cool for school hesitation about poorly pronouncing things.
Mhm.
Um, so one thing that I do that really works with secondary kids is I say, okay, we're going to say this word 3 times, and every time we say it, it's going to go a little bit faster. And so I'll say Seneca Falls Convention, Seneca Falls Convention, Seneca Falls Convention, and that helps them practice saying it, and it also helps their association with hearing that word because I know in the rest of the lesson I'm going to be saying that word. I'm
Mhm.
not going to be saying Seneca Falls Convention. I'm going to be saying during the Seneca Falls Convention. And so they get that kind of familiarity with that pace of saying it,
Okay.
and that practice with it. So that's me posing the question. And then I'm going to say, okay, well, based on what I've already decided ahead of time, I'll say you're going to share with your partner, and the person who's going to go with your partner is going to be the person with the darkest shoes. The person who's going to share first, the person with the darkest shoes. Um, and that part, uh, um, I encourage teachers to be as faithful to that part as possible, the who's going to go first part. Um, as faithful as possible. I think what I mean by that is 9 times out of 10, do that. On the 10th time, you can say just share with your partner, but 9 times out of 10, say who's going to go first. Because if we don't say who's going to go first, it's going to be the same kid who goes first every time. Um, so it kind of keeps everybody on their toes, but more importantly, it promotes equity within that elbow partnership or that small table group.
Okay.
Um, and then importantly, um, are you familiar with these icons down here about assessing?
Mhm.
Okay. So again, the majority of times, I will randomly call on students. Um, but one thing that I find is really important is to, as a rule, call on more than one student. Um, call on at least 2 students, uh, and then other students can volunteer responses after that.
Mhm.
Um, but at least randomly call on more than one student. And the reason is because um, what I want to communicate to my students is I'm not trying to see if somebody got the right answer. I'm trying to hear what my class is saying about the Seneca Falls Convention. And so if I call on multiple students, and every time I call on a student, I um, I validate what they're saying, I amplify what they're saying, and I thank them for saying and I acknowledge them, then what I'm really saying is the whole purpose of this conversation is not for you to answer my question. It's for us to have a conversation about it. Um, and so I'm very, very clear about calling on a student, calling on multiple students, and then when I do call on a student, uh, I never just say, "Okay, thank you, good answer, bye bye." I say, I'll always add to what they're saying somehow. So it might be recasting what they're saying. A student might say, um, at the Seneca Falls Convention, Lucretia Mott and Katie Stanton, Elizabeth Katie Stanton led a bunch of women to write the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments. And um, I'll say, okay, very nice. So you're saying that at the Seneca Falls Convention, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott led a group of women, and also there were men there, and together they wrote the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments. So I'll say that as a way to say, I'm hearing what you're saying, but also that student that I just made up said there was a group of women, and as the teacher, I added there was a group of
Yeah.
men. So it's kind of recasting and at the
Hmm.
same time addressing misconceptions.
Yeah. And then the student doesn't even isn't even aware that they got that little piece,
Yeah. Yeah,
um, and they feel confident about what they've done. Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
What no student wants to hear and what no teacher wants to say is you're wrong. You,
Yeah. You
I mean,
didn't
right.
remember the men.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's one thing that I really try to communicate is um, we're not trying to evaluate as like a binary thing whether a student is right or wrong. We're trying to find the rightness about what they're saying and propel the conversation based on the rightness of what they're saying. And so they did say a bunch of right things. And one of the things they said was that Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton led a group of people who wrote the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments. So I'm definitely going to clarify and correct misconceptions. But like the point of what I was saying was that yes, I appreciate what you're saying, and it's a good thing that your response is that. Um, and then when I call on other students, I'll also kind of break down the barriers by also saying it's okay if your answer is very similar or very different from what we just heard. Because what I'll also hear is I'll call randomly on a student who gives this really floral and elaborate and beautiful response. And then I'll call on a second student, and the second student will say, yeah, what she said.
Hmm.
And I'll say, no problem. If you want to say what she said, go for it. But go ahead and say it and use this sentence stem at the Seneca Falls Convention. And almost always, I mean, I don't think I've ever had a case where they've repeated that student verbatim.
Hmm.
You know, they follow that student's example, but then they use their words. And if I can hear something about what they're saying that's unique and I can point that out, then then I'll definitely point that out. They might add that this is in Seneca Falls, New York, and I'll say, did anybody else notice that this was taking place in Seneca Falls, New York? Did anybody make that connection that the Seneca Falls Convention happened in Seneca Falls, New York, or something like that? Um, and so, kind of really trying to amplify what they're saying. Uh,
Adults do that a lot. I know that when I'm doing presenting, they'll say, "Oh, we had the same idea as that person. I hadn't thought about." Okay, make them go ahead and say it again. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, because I think what they're trying to say is, oh, that idea has been shared, so
hmm,
I don't
yeah,
need to
I don't
share
want
that
to
idea.
repeat it because I'm wasting everybody's time if I do because.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And what I'm trying to say as a PD facilitator, if it's adults, or as a teacher, if it's students, what I'm trying to say is, um, I'm not trying to get uh 100% original ideas every time. If I'm calling on you, I want to hear what you have to say. Even if your idea is very similar to somebody else's idea, I specifically want to hear what you have to say. Um, I think that matters for us as adults. I think it matters for human beings generally.
Hmm.
Um, and I've heard this a million times from kids, and I've heard it from adults too, that like, I don't want to speak in front of the whole group unless I have something smart to say.
Hmm.
And it's in our nature to compare ourselves to other people. A lot of times students think, well, I'm not the smart kid in the class, so I shouldn't share because I'm not the smart kid in the class. And if the message consistently is, I'm going to call on people randomly because I want to hear from everybody. And if I call on you, I want to hear what you have to say, no matter what the words are coming out of your mouth. Then that really helps to break down that barrier.
Yeah.
So, so the structured conversation, it's almost that um, it's almost that what happens after they talk in the small group is just as important as the conversation that they have within the small group. And I like to kind of break this down in a process that I call the every voice method. And that's kind of breaking this into three parts. It's the posing and preparing, and then it's them sharing with their partner, and then it's the conversation that happens after they share with their partner, which is amplifying and celebrating what they're saying. And I like to think of this as, even though we're calling this a structured conversation, it's actually three conversations that a student is having. They're having a conversation in their own head, forming a thought, and then they're having a conversation with their peer, and then they're having a conversation in the whole group setting. And they're going to have very different ideas that emerge at every conversation. And that's going to help them. It's kind of like three different exposures or three different contexts to the same content or the same, and certainly the same language as well. Um, and so, yeah, just to summarize, the language here might sound like, think about this question, not answer this question.
Okay.
And it might be, when you're ready, show me the signal. Um, Share with your elbow partner or your table group, starting with whoever. And then finally, um, once we call on them, saying things like, ah, that's interesting that you said that because I was also noticing that, or that's interesting what you're saying because Johnny was also saying something similar. Um, it's interesting that you both made that connection, um, or even just posing it whole class like, so Rodney noticed that there were two leaders of the convention. Did anyone else talk about how there were two leaders and not one, or something like that? And these are questions that when we pose it to the whole class, maybe they don't get answered. Maybe no one says, yes, I also talked about that. But what you're doing is you're kind of validating and you're building the whole class conversation.
Okay.
So uh so that's what we really that's what I see as like the ideal structured conversation. And it's my belief that all of this conversation and this warm up can all happen in the first 10 minutes of class. And from there, a lot of the um, a lot of the gaps in background knowledge between the student who's brand new to this content and to the language and the student who is always the highest performing student in the class, a
Mhm.
lot of that gap is closed. And in the rest of the lesson, it's almost like we have this conversation, and the rest of the lesson is like an enrichment um, of that learning about the Seneca Falls Convention. They get more details, they get more exposures, they have more conversations. So yeah,
Taking notes. Right.
yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, I'm trying not to go too fast or anything.
No, it's good.
Um, uh, and then you're familiar with how the lessons are structured with multiple questions, and
Yes.
those kind of go up in
Yeah,
Bloom's.
we love the slide decks. Especially our biology team,
Oh, good.
love using those. And we've worked with our specialist. I've had my hands in the pot with certain groups, right? That we've had just some areas, but our specialists, we kind of train them and then they go out and work with the campus, like certain teachers on their campus. So I do a lot of turning around kind of what I get and give it to them. And then that way, hopefully they can go out and make that impact as well.
Yeah,
So we have a team.
that's awesome. It's awesome that there's this really sounds like a lot of cohesion between you and your team
Yeah.
and instructional leadership and the teachers who are actually delivering this.
Yeah, so they were tasked with working with a teacher that had a lot of EBs and modeling for them what it looks like. So like I said, I try to like get as much as I can so that when I give it back to them, they have like, something that they can it's almost like seeing you. We can't send everybody to your trainings, but and it's summertime, so of course,
Yeah.
getting anybody to sign up for
Yeah,
this,
I know.
unless you're like me and on a year-long schedule.
Yeah. I don't blame it. If you're off contract, go to
Yeah.
Europe,
They're
have
like, I've
fun.
already done all my summer professional learning,
Yeah. You
enjoy
deserve a
my
break.
last few days.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't hold it against them at all. No, but that's a really great approach. I applaud you. That's in my mind that's the ideal approach is because that's what we find. We find that there's a huge difference in usage and then obviously in outcomes between the teacher who um, has had the VNG modeled for them and
Yeah.
the teacher who has just been given the VNG. And it's a challenge for us because we know this and we want to have the VNG modeled for every teacher, but ultimately we depend
Mhm.
on the infrastructure of the district of instructional leadership. So it sounds like y'all are doing a great job.
I'll have to tell you how much we appreciate it. We saw this with our fifth grade teams and in working with the teachers. There was a teacher at one of our campuses that it's a campus where the demographics are a little bit different and they don't typically score as high as some of our other campuses. And the teacher was moved from social studies to science. So she didn't feel totally confident with science. And so we had trained her on this. And so she leaned on it very heavily. Her kids pulled out the strongest scores, and that's when we knew, okay, this
Oh, wow.
definitely really works. Like she really did implement it, and we could see the difference in the data for sure.
Awesome. What a
So
testimonial.
yeah, so that was very exciting.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Mhm.
That's
You
really
know,
cool.
I think she was more, if we could just get other teachers to see that, because sometimes if they've been teaching science for years and years,
Mhm.
and they do it a certain way, and it's a little bit harder to get them to kind of try, something different because they think they have it established. So
Yeah.
it seems to be something that with our newer teachers or teachers coming in and not feeling quite as confident, they kind of jump on and grasp onto it, and we're
Yeah.
just
A
wish
new-
the other ones would do the same.
Well, a new teacher will say, "Look, give me anything you've got," and I'm like,
Exactly. Let me try
yeah.
it. So anyway, so I
Or
had to share that with you.
a veteran teacher might think, "I have spent years getting to where I am, and
Hmm.
don't make
Hmm.
me completely change everything." And then also, especially with science teachers, what I often hear is, um, uh, I'm doing great hands-on stuff and I don't want to give that up. I don't want
Yeah.
to go to visuals only and then give up. And I'm always trying to say, hey, it's not one or the other. You can definitely do both. And the visuals are often aligned to the same kinds of hands-on investigations
Yeah.
that teachers would want to be doing anyway. So yeah, use
We
them.
used the 5E model, and so that was also kind of a struggle a bit. Was like, oh no, I have to do the 5E model, and I'm like, well, this kind of fits in perfectly. The whole explore thing there. You're exploring, the visual and making connections. I mean, you can follow the 5E model
Yeah.
using this. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's because they're afraid to deviate, and it's like, no, you have to implement
Yeah.
it differently. We're not. that's the nice thing. We're not giving vocabulary. Oh, this word means this, and this word means, that's what the 5E model doesn't want you to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. And that honestly, that whole conversation, I think, is a lot of semantics about like what it really means to use vocabulary, and I totally get and completely agree with the assertion that we should not start a unit by having students write down all the definitions of
Yeah.
vocabulary words. Yeah, but let's let them explore the
Hmm.
phenomenon and let's give them the words to do that so that that way they can,
Exactly.
yeah, they can
Because
form
our
that.
EBs particularly may not have that language yet to
Mhm.
be able to, you know, right there, get to the place where they want them to be. So,
Yeah,
to-
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so I will say that one thing that we've recently added into the lessons is, and I'll show you an example of this. In the notes, I'll find a random lesson. We're talking about fifth grade science, so I'll find this fifth grade science lesson.
okay.
So in the notes of the warm-up slide, you can see the visual and glossary right now, can't you?
Yeah, I
And you
can.
can see my lesson plan that I just downloaded.
Yes.
So in the notes of the warm-up slide, we've added a bunch of sentence stems,
Okay.
and these sentence stems, here we go. These sentence stems are sentence stems for the teacher to respond to what students are saying in order to amplify and celebrate what they're saying. So,
Okay.
so things like recasting what the student is saying. So you're saying this, or it's great that you noticed that. Anybody else notice that? And so these kinds of systems, when we work with teachers, we really encourage them to, if they're not practiced with kind of elevating the conversation past
Hmm.
calling on a student, then to use these systems when they're practicing. And do you know about this resource on our resources tab, a guide for structured conversations practice?
I don't know if I've gone in and looked at that
Okay.
specifically.
So when you're going into the new school year, this is also something that will really support teachers during their PLCs. Um, what it does is it allows teachers to practice going through the process. Uh,
Okay.
so it's different. It takes an example from the VNG, um, but unlike the VNG lessons, there's a giant script on the side. So,
Okay.
so this is something that they can practice like within their PLC. So if there's three teachers in the PLC, one would practice being the teacher, and the other two would practice being students.
Okay.
And so a teacher who's very new to structured conversations and isn't super familiar with it, they would just what I say is at least the first couple times go through this script verbatim, and
Okay.
you can just fill in the blanks with exactly with exactly what we've already put there for the signals and which partner you're going to share with, who then goes first, and that kind of thing. And there's three different examples in science, and there's three different examples in social studies, and three different examples in math. And so
Okay.
it's just a really clear structure for teachers in their professional learning. It's not meant to be used in classes and actual lessons with students. It's just a way to practice
Okay.
that delivery.
That's good to know.
Um, so yeah. So yeah, that's what I really encourage teachers to do. I really encourage them to follow the script and then to also um uh to challenge themselves to try to just the rule of thumb that I tell teachers is just try to no matter what a student says, add to what they're saying. So you're not going to tell them they're wrong. You're not going to tell them they're
Hmm.
right. You're going to just add to what they're saying.
Yeah.
And maybe that's going to be a connection. Maybe it's just going to be, paraphrasing what they say.
Okay.
But yeah. Um, and uh, the one other thing I wanted to share was that this all fits in between these two kind of competing educational philosophies of objectivism and constructivism. Are you familiar with that terminology?
Yeah. I do a lot of the ESL certification stuff, and we talk about, constructing knowledge and that sort of thing,
Oh,
and just the
nice.
difference between,
I didn't
um,
know that was part of the ESL certification.
yeah, there's
That's
some because
good.
it goes into the different theorists. They have to know about Piaget and Vygotsky and
Oh,
all the
nice. Yeah.
different, yeah. So there's questions on that. So we I was thinking, oh my gosh, I need to take a picture of this because this would actually be good for my training. Do you mind?
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely.
Um, yeah, basically, how do they have to be familiar with how we acquire language and how we acquire knowledge, right? And
Okay.
so,
That's
but
very interesting. That's very
yeah.
good.
And the fact that teaching and quizzing is not as effective, right?
Yeah.
They need to be and so much of what we see going into the classrooms happens to be the teaching and the quizzing, and
Mhm.
it's trying to get them to make that connection that if they get the students to actually be super involved, they're using all domains of language.
Yeah.
And then we're assessing from there. It's going to totally turn the classroom around. And I feel like we get through to elementary teachers better than we do sometimes to secondary, because I think secondary, they get very, very, they have the knowledge about their content and they have to deliver that to their students rather than facilitating their students to kind of make connections and see and figure things out on their own. So it's hard. It's hard. So this is actually kind of nice because,
Oh, good.
yeah.
That was me. I was a secondary teacher. I was a high school biology teacher. And before I went into education, I was a practicing scientist. So I had a lot of content knowledge. And um, and I actually, when I first heard about this idea of students constructing knowledge, I had this visceral objection to it because I thought to myself, um, I thought there is a truth that I know and I need to give that truth to my
Hmm.
students. And I
Hmm.
can't have them just making things up. That's
Yeah.
that's chaos, and they're going to be wrong. And I need to like this is my job. And it was a huge mind shift when I realized actually no matter what we are all internalizing new information from our own perspective and our
Hmm.
own, our unique brain is processing it that. And so, um, the only way to actually achieve like real meaning and understanding in a class I I can say I have the truth and I can tell my 30 students that truth and that will create 30 different truths. The way to actually create meaning is for us to all talk about what we understand.
Hmm.
And then as a class, we all understand it together. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, so that was a huge mind shift for me. But yeah, I was definitely this teacher for first couple years.
Yeah. I think we all come into it like that. I was in certain areas and then they had me um teach math, and I'm not that great at math. But it was only third grade math.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So when I was an elementary teacher. And so I thought I was going to be terrible at it, right? I'm not going to be a good math teacher because I was not a great math student, right? That was
Uh-huh.
not something that came easy for me. But because I felt the need to look at it from not understanding, I actually became kind of a good math teacher. Now, I would not have been able to do high school or higher level math. Like we're talking about kind of basic math because I always needed to know the why. And I think when I was learning, I never knew why. Why do we do this? Why do we carry? Why do we? It didn't make sense to me. And I
Yeah.
needed to see something concrete. So I did a lot of concrete kind of, we did, unifix cubes and stuff with place value and that sort of thing so that they could kind of see how that works.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you can be a pretty good teacher if you struggled with something because you kind of know what to expect might be those
Yeah.
roadblocks for students that just don't get it. Where if you know something and you just get it, it's hard to understand when students don't get it when you just tell them.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Definitely. Yeah,
it
I've
was
heard that people who say that they're not math people often make really great math teachers.
Yeah, because we know what the where the misconceptions are because
Yeah.
we had them and had to figure them out. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, so you just always have to think about it from the angle of students and what they're seeing, and which is why we really want the dialogue to be happening in the class, like, using Q triple SA with math so that teachers can pick up, oh, this conversation's going this way. This student has a misconception and they can clear it up in the moment, right?
Yeah.
We don't know that if we're just telling them how to do it and we're wondering why in the world are they continuing to make these mistakes or not understand if we don't hear them try to verbalize it. So
Yeah, exactly.
that's huge.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, we've heard so many teachers, I've said it myself many times, say, but I told them this 100 times. Why
Hmm.
didn't they get it? And it's so great if you can flip that script on its head. Instead of saying, but I told them this 100 times, you can say, but I heard what they were saying, and that gave me
Hmm.
an understanding about what they were understanding.
Hmm.
And honestly, you probably only have to hear what they're saying once or twice before
Yeah.
you know how to guide that conversation. So
Yeah,
yeah,
because, for somebody who's things are automatic, it just makes sense. They may not think about all the different misconceptions that can come into play.
yeah, 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 yeah. And also when it comes to language, not understanding the vocabulary or being new to the vocabulary,
Yeah.
it can be very hard for a teacher, especially a teacher who grew up monolingual speaking English and
Hmm.
doesn't have that lens of what it's like to be an EB. I was that teacher, and I had a student. My favorite example was, um, I thought that this student for weeks, I thought this student was sad or defiant or something because every time I would show a data table, I would say, look at the table, and the student would look at the desk, put their head down, and I meant the data table on the board, but they were looking at the table. Yeah. I mean, they're doing
Oh.
exactly what I told them to. Yeah, but I didn't even make that connection, and
Oh.
and but when you let students talk and you listen to them, everything comes out and you can really understand.
Yeah.
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 Mhm.
Um, well, I think that's all I have. I wanted to say that, like I feel like in society at large, but definitely within our education system, there's a lot of box checking, and students feel like they need to check a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
We, as educators, feel like we need to check a lot of boxes. And if we can shift that to, especially if we can teach our students to shift that to, everyone has something meaningful to say.
Hmm.
Say that meaningful thing. Don't worry about, I'm your teacher, so I'm your boss. Don't worry about making me happy. Worry about saying something meaningful, and we're all going to learn together as a result of that.
Yeah.
That's my that's my message.
Yeah, no, this was really helpful. It reminded me of some things that, as I'm trying to present, things that I can be doing a little bit better for sure.
Wonderful.
So
Yeah, wonderful. Okay. So were there things that were new to this uh about structuring conversations?
I think it's more just the reminders and then also just the suggestions for how as it's communicated, how to make sure that you leave it open for growth and to make sure that that effective filter isn't going up for those
Yeah.
students,
Yeah.
that how
Yeah.
you say it, when you say it, that sort of thing. I think that I tried to write down um, all the different things that you talked about because it's so true. And sometimes, we kind of forget about that,
Yeah.
and may not realize that we're raising that effective filter and students do start to shut down because that's what we don't want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, just even like when you were saying as a response, that's interesting because, like how you respond to all of that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
can
I
be good.
mean, for a lot of kids, that might be the first time they've ever been told that what they're saying is interesting.
Yeah. And I love the new amplifying and celebrating.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, and that's another thing is my thing is I have all my students, or if I'm doing PD, all of my participants clap every time someone shares something. And people ask me, doesn't that get old? And it's my thing, so it doesn't get old.
Yeah.
And then everyone responds really well to it. But what I tell teachers is, whatever your thing is, do it. Some like the snap, some like the, you know,
Yeah.
what is it, like fabuloso or something like that.
Yeah. That one's cute. I know they have all the elementary, they get really wild with the
Elementary does get wild.
all the different things.
Yeah. You can call I'm a secondary person because I'm
Kiss
really
kiss
boring.
your
Yeah.
brain and
Yeah, I know. That stuff is great. That's
yeah.
funny. When I first time I saw that Kiss Your Brain, I thought I would never have thought of that. That's so cute. I love that.
I know the elementary ones get kind of good. But you know what? The older ones like all that kind of stuff too. They
Yeah,
really do.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Here's my email address. I can put it in the chat
Okay.
as well. If you'd like to have Julie come out and um either just have a conversation with your leadership or do
Okay.
walkthroughs with y'all. I know that's what she lives for. She's a consultant slash visual developer. But what she lives for is being in schools. So
Okay.
yeah. So feel free to get in touch if that's something y'all want to do. Otherwise, definitely I and Julie are going to be doing these webinars, each of
Okay.
us once a month. My partner Klee is also going to be starting her webinar series in the next couple of months.
Okay.
Um, and I will also tell you that, let me just share this. Um, so on the Visual Non-Glossary, um, there is on this section on the trainings page, there is an
Hmm.
asynchronous training course,
Okay.
and anyone can do it. And if they finish it, they just email me and I'll send them a PD certificate. Uh,
Okay.
it is a very low tech course. It's a giant PDF with different sections and then opportunities to respond on Padlet.
Okay.
And there's actually like a million different responses on there already.
Okay.
All these questions. So this exists right now, this course, but
What tab was that under the
uh-huh. So this is in resources
resources
and then training.
and then training? Okay.
And in training, you'll see three tabs at the top.
Okay.
The first tab that you get to is just free stuff open to the public.
Okay.
And then the other two tabs are contracted, either training or coaching, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Um, but we are in the process of turning this into an actual like embedded module within the VNG where teachers who go through this course can interact with other teachers who are using the VNG,
Okay.
and it's also going to be like kind of a community where people can share ideas and that kind of thing. So that's one way that we're trying to also kind of spread the education and make it more accessible for teachers.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.